good afternoon. I'm quite honored to be here. Rotary's been a part of my life since I was at Broadmoor High School, and I was a sweetheart at the Interact Club alongside Shard. And for the last 35 years, we've enjoyed a tradition every year of bringing our girls to the Young Heroes program every year, as well as all of the service that you guys get Shard to do. And so we're really a whole family that backs Rotary, and it's just really an honor to speak with you today. And also, it's very exciting for me to share with you something that I'm so passionate about. I hope I don't talk too long, but it's because I am very passionate about the work that we've been doing. I'm going to use a PowerPoint today, and I hope that I don't make you seasick, because I'm going to go back and forth through a few slides. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you a little bit of basics on Lean Six Sigma. I'm going to tell you our Cinderella story from the crime lab. That was really the project that kicked it all off in state government. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of other projects we've done, and I'm seeing some team members in the room, so I know they can attest to some of the work that we've done. I'll go over a few myths, and then kind of what you might do to implement this in your own world, in your own career, in your own business. So just to get started, I'll give you a few basics. So there's Lean and there's Six Sigma. And then back in early 2000, those two were combined to kind of the secret sauce of Lean Six Sigma. And so Lean was improvement methodology that you would hear about from Toyota production systems in the 50s. You've heard about General Electric talking about how they create a conveyor belt of production and eliminate waste. So they increase productivity through the elimination of waste. And I'm going to jump back to this, and you can Google this at home in your free time, is the 8 kinds of waste. And so we use the acronym Downtime. And I'm not going to read these to you, but I can tell you that it was not intuitive to me when I first got into this work that not using people for all of their skills and their abilities is a form of waste. Having too much raw inventory waiting around for you to use it is waste. Making too much of something is waste. And so there are some things about this methodology that you learn in the process of doing these projects that maybe kind of upsets what you've always thought. The second part of this is the Six Sigma. And this is where those of you will go to sleep after lunch if I don't zoom past this really quickly. This is the statistical part. So Motorola back in, it was actually a little earlier than 86, it was early 80s, they were producing radios that were, the public just basically said the quality stinks, and they were having to rebuild the ones that were being returned to them because they were defective, and it was hurting their bottom line. Ford was another company who really focused on quality. You remember the slogan, quality is job one? Well, that was really their means of saying we're going to make checking quality in every step of the process a priority. And so those companies, you can look at some of the dollar amounts from Motorola, when they realized that quality was a big deal to customers, they began to focus on it, and their profitability just skyrocketed. So don't get too lost on that slide. I'm going to go back for just a second. So basically, when you put together increase in productivity on a conveyor belt that produces no defects and high quality, and you do it on a consistent basis and there's no variation, that's it. That's what it's all about. And so this methodology uses structured teams that work through very structured phases of work, and at the end of the line you have process improvement and efficiencies. So I'll skip ahead. So notice that little Six Sigma in the corner. So I'm going to tell you what this means, so maybe you'll remember. I hear people call it sexy Sigma. I mean, there's all kind of things that people kind of mix it up with. But the Six Sigma refers to, if you think of a bell-shaped curve in school, remember a few people got A's, more people got B's, a bunch of people got C's, D's, and a few poor unfortunate souls got F's. The over here in the A category, way out there, 6 standard deviations from the mean, that's the huckleberry. That is where you have 3.4 defects per million opportunities. So if you produce 3.4 defects out of 1 million radios, you're doing pretty darn good. Now I know that there are some of you in the room that will find this as a shocking fact, but we struggle to get to Six Sigma in government. We do. So when we do a lot of these projects, we do measure our sigma values and we try to get better. We try to make our sigma values better. But I cannot share with you that we have achieved Six Sigma in any of our government projects as of yet. Now, that is the type of area where people like NASA and 3M and some of these industrial companies where they have the ability to measure that precise amount of defects, they get there. But anyway, I wanted you to kind of have an idea of what Six Sigma referred to. So that's last slide on this is that, from my point of view, what makes this methodology so improved, because there's been others, TQM, there's other improvement methods that have come through the years, but the reason that I like this one is because it really has a few factors that are just key. It's focused on the customer. The whole point of this is to delight your customer. So who can argue with that, right? It's accomplished by an intrinsic team who knows the work, who knows what needs to be done, who knows what doesn't work well, and then the management becomes the champions of the projects. And the decisions are made based on data, and then we have a very phased timelines that have serious deadlines. And so we work through this DMAIC process, it's called. We define the problem, we measure the data, we analyze the data. Based on that data, we decide what to improve. And then we go through a control phase, which is, if you roll the boulder up the hill, it's can you keep the boulder at the top of the hill, that you don't slide back down. Because if you've built something that everybody can only hold their breath and do for a few days, then you haven't fixed the process. So that's your lesson on Lean Six Sigma for today. Now I'll tell you the fun story. So this all began when I went to the State Police Crime Lab. I'm going to check some of my notes because I want to make sure I hit all these points. So the governor and the colonel at State Police, so the Crime Lab is part of State Police under the Department of Public Safety. There was a 15,000 case backlog at that time. It was not an unusual problem. All crime labs in the country were having this problem because the technology had gotten so good that someone could touch a surface and we could swab it and get DNA and hopefully take that profile and put it into the FBI database and make a match on a case. So we were getting evidence, out the wazoo because of this increase in our technology. In addition to that, the crime lab was coming off of kind of a bad time. This was like in 2007, 2008. We were post-Katrina, and the crime lab was responsible for all the family assistance profiles and matching. We had just added on, doubled the size of the crime lab, and we're finishing up a construction project. And then lastly, we were coming off of a serial killer case that we had solved, but had run lots and lots of DNA and other things had kind of taken a back burner. So it's understandable that, and it took 2 years to train people. So even if you hired someone new, the FBI wouldn't sign off on them for at least 18 months or 2 years before they could even do casework. And then, of course, in all of that, we're trying to solve for something where you can't change the recipe. You can't change the protocol for DNA. It has to be done a particular way. So all of those things together, the governor basically said, this is a priority. Then the colonel turned and said, this is a priority, and get rid of that 15,000 case backlog. And so the biggest part of that was causing us angst was that we had about 1,700 cases that were DNA cases. And so for you all know this because of CSI and NCIS, all these shows that say that, if we can get a DNA profile, it's pretty much a slam dunk in the court case. And so we were running up against court cases. They were getting ready to go to trial and the DNA wasn't done. We were losing confidence of our law enforcement agencies who would actually pay. We were free, right? So they could bring us evidence and we'd run cases for the taxpayers were paying for that. But they would actually outsource these cases out of state and pay thousands of dollars to get these cases worked just so they could have them in time for the trial. So all of this was not acceptable, right? And so it's during a time of severe budget constraints. There were no additional positions to hire additional people. And quite frankly, we had used our grant money and outsourced to other labs over and over again, and it still wasn't moving the needle for us. And so, again, when I came on board, I thought, I really don't know if I can really fix this. I mean, I had read about process mapping, and I really didn't know if I had the tools or the know-how to get this done. But I went to a conference. It was the Department of Justice conference, and I went to one of those poster sessions. Takeaway note, always go to the poster sessions, because there was a poster in there that was from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division that had used this improvement methodology known as Lean Six Sigma, and they'd shaved off 3 months of their reporting time on a case. And so I started asking questions about it in the industry. Next thing you know, there was a grant that was offered by the National National Institutes of Justice, and it was called the DNA Forensic Efficiency Improvement Grant. If you Google that today, it'll pull up all 50 pages of our project. Well, we had about 3 weeks. We got the application together, applied for it. I mean, we hit go at 3:25 on a Friday afternoon when it was due at 3:30, and we were one of 6 labs that were awarded in the country to get the money for this grant. So what we wrote into the grant was, we wanted a consultant to come in and teach us how to do Lean Six Sigma, run a project in our DNA to help us eliminate this backlog, and also to teach us how to do this process. So what does the proverb go? You feed a person a fish and you feed them for a day, you teach them how to fish and you feed them for a lifetime. So we wrote in there that we wanted to learn how to do this. And so we had some really lofty goals. We knew we'd never get picked if we didn't have lofty goals. So we said crazy things like, we're going to cut the backlog in half. We're going to cut the turnaround time from when a case gets to the lab till we report it. We're going to cut that in half. We're going to double the number of our productivity. We're going to double the number of CODIS hits, or the matches that we get in the database. And honestly, I really thought, if we get this, I don't really know how we're going to do this, but we're going to put this in there. So let me show you the results. So what we did, we had a 3-pronged approach. We basically said, we've got to stop the amount of evidence that's coming in. We met with all law enforcement agencies and said, okay, truce. If you give us your 5 most probative pieces of evidence, we'll promise to get them to you in 2 weeks. And then if that doesn't do it for you, you can bring us another 5 pieces of evidence. But please don't bring us all 80 to start with. So we control the incoming flow with our partners, and they were all in. The second part of it is, we leaned out that process that we could. We couldn't tinker with the recipe, right, or the protocols, but we could do a whole lot of other stuff, which I'll show you. And the last thing is, we manage the people with lean management, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But make note of the fact that we're talking about a process, we're talking about how we manage the people, we're talking about our incoming. These are common themes you're going to see in some of our other projects. So we did a pilot. It was from May to September. I got certified as a black belt, which is like a training level that you go through in Lean Six Sigma in the course of this project, and that made me able to do other projects. And then it was so successful that we expanded it and then eliminated the backlog throughout the crime lab and all the other laboratories in the lab. And so the most amazing thing is the sustainability of this project. So I'll show you a few things. So remember those wildly crazy goals that I mentioned? Well, you can see that we more than achieved them. That's our before. Those were our grant targets. And then by the next March, which was really a year later from when we really began the whole thing, you can see instead of having 258, we were down to 59. And then for the pilot itself, we were down to 14 days. And then they've shaved off additional days since then, because it's a continuous quality improvement. You can see, though, all the other things, we more than doubled our productivity. We cut our backlog, and then actually more than doubled our CODIS hits. So how do we do all that? So we did it on 2 levels. We did it at what I'll call the cellular level, and then we did it kind of at a macro level. And this is Shard's favorite slide of all the things I've ever done. This is her favorite slide of all. And so this spaghetti map on the left, the colorful one in the corner, is a map of the DNA unit, and it's as we carry a sexual assault case into the lab, that's all the places where we go in the course of work in a case. And you can see we went through and we measured with one of those little roly measure things. Every distance and every 2 feet that we measured was a step, and that was related to 1 step was a second. So we converted all of that walking around to say that it was however much time it was per case. And this was just our sexual assault cases. So when we did all of our efficiency measures, we remeasured everything, and that's the map down on the bottom right-hand corner, and we shaved off nearly a mile for every case. That was just travel time within the laboratory. So it was tedious, of course, measuring all this. We actually took off doors off the labs. We had this beautiful new building, but the analysts would come along with their gloves and their racks, and they'd have to go set the rack down, then they'd have to open the door, and then they'd bring the rack inside, and then they'd close the door. And so we just took all the doors off. It wasn't a contamination issue. It was all within one suite. And so it saved them, a few seconds, maybe a minute each time. And you multiply that times the number of cases. So we just shaved away all those little savings. And then at the macro level, we actually looked at how we assigned cases and how our teams worked together. So initially, when I first came to the crime lab, when a case came in, we would kind of deal them like cards. We just round robin. Everybody get a case, then everybody get another case. And then you were just kind of in charge of making sure you went and got what you needed to get done to get that case worked. Well, what we did here, we formed teams, we made batches of cases, all these little lines under those pictures, those are the teams and those are the cases, and these are the steps in the process. So we made a conveyor belt so that team had to finish all of those cases today and get out of that room and go to the next one because somebody else was moving in the next day. And those of you who've moved out of a house, you know what I'm talking about. When you close and the people are coming to move in tomorrow, you really don't have a choice but to get it done. And that's how we changed it. Now, this was a wipe erase board with tape and magnets, and we called this our production board. This is another common theme. So on the left-hand side, that's the crime lab out in the hallway. In the early days, we would do these huddles. So every morning, everybody got up there and they reported out what they did yesterday, what they're going to do today, and if they're going to have any obstacles that we need to deal with so they can get done what they're supposed to do today to move that busload of cases to the next step. And that's where the magic began to happen, because these folks began to solve each other's problems. And you'll see in the bottom picture, we went to electronic dashboards. So those pictures and pie graphs and all that stuff, that is dashboards that touch the database, the tracking system, and draw pictures every 15 minutes. So if you walk through the laboratory today, you can look up there and you can see how many cases have come in that hadn't been assigned, how many of them are murders, how many of them, and quite frankly, if somebody's got a few cases that are overdue, their name jumps up there a whole lot. And so it's miraculous how that just gets that case worked. It's just amazing. And so, the best part of that is that we managed the people with these huddles. We standardized and we scheduled everything. And we created that conveyor belt, that lean conveyor belt. And then we also, we had several stops along the way where we're checking our quality at every stop. And so the morale went out the roof. We worried that people were going to quit because they were so, quote, micromanaged. Well, they weren't micromanaged, they were managed. And their work was managed, and it was attainable, and they knew what was expected. And when they began solving each other's problems, those of us who were in management just sat back and watched the magic happen. And I'm happy to say that because of this, it changed the way not only that lab performed, but all the other labs couldn't wait to do it as well, because they saw what was happening there and how much everybody liked it. And so when we talk about a project and we talk about control and sustainability, remember I told you that we fixed the process, we used technology, we managed the people. Those are common themes. And you can see now, you don't have to try to read all that tiny print, but these are metrics. The top graph is, the left bar is the cases that came in, the right bar is the cases that got completed. And then you can see along the x-axis are all the different years. And so you can see that prior to our Lean Six Sigma project, man, the blue bar was a lot taller than the red bar. And then on the right-hand side, you can see we were completing more cases than we were receiving, working through backlog mostly. But you could also see the number of cases went way up, and yet we were still able to do that. And so they sustained that. The second graph is the number of backlog cases. And you can see that it just continued to go down year after year after year. And then the last one was the turnaround time on the cases. Again, it keeps going down, 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 year after year. And so, and even today, it's a process of they monitor, they make adjustments, they reassess. They do something, they monitor it, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things that I wanted to convey to you, though, a lot of people will say, oh, but that's a laboratory, or that's a manufacturing process. That won't work in sales, or that won't work in other industries. And so I wanted to show you a couple of projects. Okay, we've got to speed this up. A couple of projects that will kind of demonstrate otherwise. So in the Office of Public Health, the Sanitarians, which is now is a bureau that I'm over, they do the retail food, the restaurant inspections. And we were in a terrible backlog, and of course that's a risk for public health, food infections and illness and death. So we needed to get a handle on that. So we had about 44% of our inspections were in backlog. There again, we created a scheduler tool where the inspectors knew what were the highest priority and the inspections that were most likely to go overdue first, and they did those first. And before that, they just got to pick and choose where they went. So we created a process, we did the lean management, and then we also improved our compliance enforcement process. So we had some bad players, and it resulted in us just going out and going and going and going and re-inspecting. And we got rid of all that because we just kind of got little stronger teeth there. And so we got them back on track a little faster faster and saved a lot of rework there. But we did a pilot. Again, after we piloted it 3 months, we expanded it to all of our sanitarians, about 200 of them statewide, and we improved. And you can see that we had a 43% past due inspections, and at the end of it, we were at 13.4% when we finished the project. But by March of 2015, with almost 43,000 inspections that they're called to do annually, there's no past due inspections. And I oversee this bureau right now, and I can tell you that we are between 0 and 2%, and when we get to 2%, we're doing something about it. So we monitor it now. We know what that number is on a weekly basis. Another project was at the Division of Administration, where we did a project with the Office of State Procurement. Again, the theme being that, you know, we went through these phases of improvement there. It was over 3 years, and we created an electronic portal where the documents could be sent electronically, so there was no more paper. We could have transparency and know where those cases were, and we used dashboards. We made teams. We used production boards and team huddles. And so there you can see some of the metrics there. We increased productivity 2.5 times. We decreased the number of people that were needed to do procurement. Now, this is at the state level. This is where they approve all of the commodity and contracts at the state level. And it was taking too long, so this productivity was a big deal. We reduced our turnaround times for that, and it was a nearly $10.4 million. We call it an efficiency gain. It's not money savings, but it's time, which equals money savings. And we were recognized in 4 different national organizations as being innovative in government. So here on the myths, I just wanted to mention to you a couple of things that I hear. You know, I told you earlier, some people say, hey, this won't work in my industry. Well, if everything's a process in my brain. Everything can be broken out into a process map. And if it can be broken out in a process map, it can be measured. And if it can be measured, it can be improved. The other thing is that people worry that it's going to eliminate jobs. Well, it doesn't eliminate jobs. It allows you to take a person's time and shift them to the thing that you really want them to do. And you free up that time they were spending doing a lot of bureaucratic or paperwork type of stuff that really wasn't their highest and best use, is what we use that term. And then some people will say, oh, but when the political winds blow, this is all going to go out the window. Well, I've talked to other states, and I asked them, how do you make it stick? And they would tell me at the time, they'd say, you know what, it's apolitical, because who's not for delighting the customer, and who's not for having good service and good quality and doing it in a cost-effective manner? And that's truly what I found, is that if you're really working at it for that purpose, then it is apolitical. And then the last thing I'd mention is not everything's a Lean Six Sigma project. There are some things that are just do it. I mean, you see the data and you see it's wrong and you see where it's broken, just fix it. This is time-consuming and somewhat costly of an investment. So you don't want to spend 6 to 9 months working on a project that you could have really knocked out in a day. And there, I can talk another whole hour about how we found shorter cuts of doing that. But at the end of the day, how do you get started? Well, you have to be honest about what your problems are. You got to have that stinging statement that says what's broken. Then you've got to basically be willing to engage a team and some time to do it right. We found a strategy to train people within the departments who could then run other projects, kind of like bamboo. It would just spread, and that's what we did in the state. We've trained about 20 or 30. I've trained about 20 in the Department of Health, and we probably another 15 outside of the Department of Health. But we've trained them. When you get to the green belt, you can run projects yourself. Black belt is a little higher level, and the master black belt is, you know, the trainer of all and the master of all those, and no karate tricks. Training is always best if it's a project. You can go online and get these belts, but if you're not running a project, leading a team through change, it's probably not as good a training program. And then I just want to say a little shout out to Mallory for developing our logo that we use in the state for Lean Six Sigma. You see the 6 and the Sigma that I showed you earlier, and then we use this little belt on there to designate. We have pins and stuff that we use to designate their various levels of training. Okay, Maui, did it. I have time for a couple of questions, I think. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Can you go to the Department of Transportation next?
I have not done a project in the Department of Transportation. So, yeah, okay. Would love to. Anybody else?
Is your department the only organization in the state that operates like this?
So when I was at the crime lab, we discovered Lean Six Sigma, and then for 6 years I ran projects, probably two or three dozen projects in all the different state departments. I was in the Department of Corrections, I was in the general counsel's office at the Division of Administration. I was at Children and Family Services. We did projects in all these different state departments. That was my full-time job. And then when I went to the Department of Health, I then became more of an executive leader, and then we built a foundational program in the Department of Health. So for 6 years, I was kind of on loan in all these different departments. So yes, they do have some green belts in other departments. It never took off quite as much as I would have liked to have seen, but at the same time, we were able to really put some key people in places who I think are still doing some really good things. Yes,
Do you
ma'am.
have any type of PMP training or certification to go with this?
We don't incorporate that, but a lot of the same skills that you learn in the project management are also in here as well. But we stick to the Lean Six Sigma belts. And actually, that industry is not super standardized. Like you can go to different consultants and different organizations and they'll have different requirements. But in the state, I have been very regimented about this is what you have to do. You have to get at least $50,000 of efficiency gains for you to get a green belt, $100,000 to get a black belt, and you have to complete a project that is kind of blessed or certified according to all the rules that we have. So. Yes, sir.
You mentioned Division of Administration. Jay Yard, know what you're doing and try to push that through the other departments in the state government?
Right, so Commissioner Darden and I have had several conversations. In fact, he endorsed a lot of the work that I did in the Division of Administration. It hasn't really taken off to the level that it would have to be at to really stick. In other words, there are two states that really do it well, the state of Washington and the state of Ohio. And so we had conferences before where all of the points from all the different states that do this got together, and I asked them, how do you weather the change of an administration? Because sometimes administration doesn't want to do what the previous administration put in place. And they actually formed a state agency for this. So they actually report to the legislature every quarter what their progress is on the projects that they're doing, and they run it as a separate state agency. And so I know that Jay is very supportive of it, and I think that he would endorse all the project work that we could do for him, but it's not very structured yet in state government.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mendy.
thank you.